Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Professional Practice for Diagnostic Medical Sonographers. This will be the last webinar we have specifically about sonographers because you've been with us now for a couple of years and so now fully integrated into CMRTO. So we're happy to have you here. Of course, this recording will be shared on our website, so if any of your colleagues are not able to be with us today, they'll be able to look at it later at their convenience. And as you know, CMRTO is regulating 5 specialties of medical radiation and imaging technology, 1 profession, and of course we regulate the profession to serve and protect the public interest. And we do this through self-regulation, which is legislation that's granted to a profession by provincial government on behalf of the citizens of that province. And it's really a recognition that the members of a profession are best suited to govern their own profession based on their professional knowledge, skills, and judgment. So it's really that the profession has all the information and expertise to be able to regulate itself. But the profession must regulate in the public interest. We often talk about self-regulation being a privilege, not a right. So how do we protect the public? There's really 3 ways. The first is registration. Only individuals who've met all the requirements for registration are able to practice the profession. So that's the first step in making sure that the public is protected from unqualified practitioners. The second thing is continued competence. So all CMRTO members are required under the legislation to complete the CMRTO Quality Assurance Program every single year. And that's for your entire career while you're a member of CMRTO. And then we have an enforcement of standards process. So this is a process set out in the legislation again, where we can receive complaints from the public and we can deal or address issues of concern from the public related to incompetence, professional misconduct, or incapacity. What the regulator can't do, because we have a lot of responsibilities and accountabilities, but we regulate the practice of the profession, of the professionals themselves. So we regulate sonographers and medical radiation technologists, but not the use of the technology. So that's a government decision. So the government decides if other professions are going to be able to use the technology or if it can be used for non-medical use. So CMRTO is regulating diagnostic medical sonographers and MRTs in the public interest. Nor can we influence union activities, collective agreements, or work conditions. So it really is a relationship between the member themselves who are authorized to practice the profession and the regulator. So what does this mean for the public? Well, it's an assurance that all regulated CMRTO members are highly trained and competent health professionals who've met the established entry to practice requirements. So they're safe to practice. Same for the internationally educated. Internationally educated members also have to go through a proper and fair assessment in order to be able to be registered and permitted to practice the profession. The public can also rely on the fact that members are committed to ongoing continued competence and professional development throughout their entire career. And of course, we have a fair and transparent process for complaints and professional conduct issues. The public also has access to the full registry of all CMRTO registered members. And we'll talk about this in the future in another webinar, but this is an important component around transparency and public protection. And although the public generally doesn't get to choose their medical radiation technologist or diagnostic medical sonographer. Employers do. So employers will be checking our public register to make sure that their sonographers and MRTs are registered and active with CMRTO.
The College of Medical Radiation Technologists of Ontario is growing and changing. We are welcoming more than 4,000 diagnostic medical sonographers as regulated health professionals.
For over 25 years, CMRTO has been regulating medical radiation technologists in our other 4 specialties of radiography, nuclear medicine, radiation therapy, and magnetic resonance imaging. Now the public of Ontario can be assured that their CMRTO registered diagnostic medical sonographer is able to provide safe, competent, and ethical care for their ultrasound exams. Rest assured, this is an evolution, not a revolution, and CMRTO continues to protect the public of Ontario by making sure that medical radiation and imaging technologists are qualified to practice and they're practicing professionally. In 2017, the Government of Ontario passed the Medical Radiation and Imaging Technology Act. This act adds diagnostic medical sonography as another specialty to the college, and it will also change the name of CMRTO to the College of Medical Radiation and Imaging Technologists of Ontario. Although the act is not in force yet, we decided to let the public and our members know about this change by updating our visual identity. Our new visual identity features an updated logo, our acronym, CMRTO, and also tells the public and our members what it is that we do. We regulate medical radiation and imaging technologists in Ontario. And when the new Medical Radiation and Imaging Technology Act comes into force, you'll see our name change as well. We've redeveloped our website using our new visual identity, making it easier to navigate, find the information that you need while increasing transparency. From the main navigation bar in the header, you can search by public, member, applicants, or employers to find the information that's relevant for you. An important feature of the website is our Find a Member tool that provides information to the public and employers about individual medical radiation and imaging technologists who are registered with CMRTO. The resources section of the website is also a valuable tool that features a library of our publications and webinar recordings.
We hope you're as excited as we are about these new changes. Be sure to visit cmrto.org for more information.
Thanks. So I hope that gives you a sense of where CMRTO is in the regulation of sonographers and the change of our name. We just heard from the government a couple of weeks ago that the MRIT Act will be coming into force on January 1, 2020. So you're going to see all our publications updated and our website updated as we go through this transition. And in fact, our very next webinar is about the MRIT Act and what members can expect when that comes into force. So for sonographers though, the year 2018 was a year of transition. We had the legal authority to regulate sonographers, but it wasn't yet mandatory. And during that year, we had the grandparenting period for registration. So we wanted to make sure that all the practicing sonographers in the province were registered with us for the end of the year. We also had a revised standards of practice and code of ethics come into effect to include the practice of diagnostic medical sonography, and our revised quality assurance program came into effect. And in March of 2018, we registered the first diagnostic medical sonographers in Canada. So these are the very first sonographers who were registered with a regulatory body as a separate profession. The regulation of sonographers was completed on January 1st of this year, And that was when the amendments to the Controlled Acts regulation made under the Regulated Health Professions Act came into force. So as of January 1, only members of CMRTO or the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, the College of Midwives, and the College of Nurses are authorized to apply sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound. So that's how the Controlled Act appears in, or how the use of sound waves appears in the Controlled Acts regulation. So it's applying sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound. So some of you may remember that before this came into effect, it said any person could apply sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound, provided it was ordered by the appropriate health professional. And that's what we meant when we said that sonographers were not regulated, because any person could do it. You didn't have to be a member of a regulated health college. And so that's what happened on January 1st of this year. That loophole was closed, and now only members of CMRTO and these 3 other colleges are legally authorized to apply sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound under the Regulated Health Professions Act. So as of September 30th this year, you can now see the number of active members that we have by primary specialty. So almost 4,000 diagnostic medical sonographers. This is primary specialty. We actually have more than 4,000 if we account for those who have multiple specialties. So one of the questions that sonographers often have is, what about the areas of practice of general and cardiac and vascular? So the CMRTO registration regulation only issues one specialty certificate for all the areas of practice for diagnostic medical sonography. So we presume that diagnostic medical sonography is one specialty certificate. And so those other 3 areas are considered an area of practice underneath that particular specialty. Now, this is very similar to the model that we have for our other specialties, including radiography. We don't have a special subspecialty certificate for mammography or CT or interventional or other areas where members might specialize. And so this is consistent with all 5 specialty areas of medical radiation and imaging technology. There will be areas of subspecialization within that, and that's okay. That's the way individual members practice and evolve. You become specialized in different areas. So these are the titles. So sonographers who are registered with CMRTO are able to use their protected title, MRT DMS, but I think most of them are dropping the MRT, and that's certainly an option under the registration regulation, and just using DMS. So that's the protected title. Only members of CMRTO are authorized to use that particular protected title when they are a member. So if you resign from CMRTO because you're taking leave, you can no longer use your DMS until you're back and active member again and qualified to practice in Ontario again. So our registration requirements assures the public that members have met all the entry to practice requirements. And so sonographers must be registered with CMRTO in order to practice after January 1st, 2019. And all this information is included on the public register of members section of our website. After January 1st, that was when the grandparenting period ended, and now all sonographers are required to successfully complete an approved educational program in their specialty, and also successfully complete an approved examination. There's other requirements related to professional conduct, also You have to complete the legislation learning package, all those kinds of things. And once a member or once an applicant has completed all those requirements, then they receive their registration or their license to practice, and they're able to practice. So applicants who don't meet these requirements are referred to the registration committee, and the registration committee review all the international candidates for registration. So that's registration. You're all in now and registered as of January 1. So now you're practicing under the Regulated Health Professions Act, which is something new for sonographers. And so we'll just do a quick recap of what that means. Well, the RHPA framework has a scope of practice statement, which is a general description of what it is that a profession does. Under the Act, there are 13 controlled acts, and these are, actually 14 now. I need to update that slide. Sorry about that. And these are 14 clinical activities that pose a risk of harm to the public if they're performed by unqualified individuals. So what the RHPA does is it restricts these controlled acts to being able to be performed only by health professionals who are authorized to do so under their health profession specific legislation. And so we have 5 authorized acts under the Medical Radiation Technology Act. And healthcare practitioners can also have controlled acts delegated to them or be exempted from them. And certainly before sonographers became regulated under the RHPA, that was how you were able to do some of the controlled acts, was through delegation from the physicians. So here's the scope of practice statement for MRITs. So the practice of medical radiation and imaging technology. So the brackets is the part that comes into effect when the MRIT Act comes into effect on January 1. So practice of medical radiation and imaging technology is the use of ionizing radiation, electromagnetism, and other prescribed forms of energy, and that's sound waves, for the purposes of diagnostic and therapeutic procedures, the evaluation of images and data relating to the procedures, and the assessment of the individual or patient before, during, and after the procedures. So you can see there why this is one profession. Although we've got 5 distinct specialties that are different depending on the forms of energy that they're using and whether they're doing diagnostic or therapeutic procedures, we have one scope of practice that all 5 specialties fit under. Here's our authorized acts, and I have highlighted or bolded the areas that sonographers do. So under the MRT Act, and it will be the same under the MRIT Act, in the course of engaging in the practice of the profession, a member is authorized, provided they have the education and experience, to perform the following. So number 1 is administering substances by injection or inhalation. And of course, sonographers do that when they're injecting contrast media or doing bubble studies. Number 2, tracheal suctioning of a tracheostomy, not something that sonographers do. Number 3 is administering contrast media or putting an instrument, hand or finger, so certainly an instrument, beyond 4 body orifices. And so of course sonographers do 2, beyond the labia majora for your TB examinations and beyond the anal verge. Number 4 is performing a procedure on tissue below the dermis, and sonographers do this when they do a venipuncture for the injection of contrast. And number 5, which is the one you do every single day, is applying a prescribed form of energy, and in this case that is sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound. So those are now authorized acts. You no longer need delegation or exemption for doing those. They're now authorized to you under the legislation. But before performing authorized acts, Members must make sure they have the necessary knowledge, skill, and judgment to perform the act safely, effectively, and ethically. And we also have to make sure that there's an appropriate order in place from the physician or the other authorized health professionals authorizing the performance of the procedure. So we don't self-initiate. We need an order to be able to do any of our authorized acts. So that includes applying sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound. So now sonographers only need an order, not a delegation from a physician to perform their authorized acts. And this is going to take a while for people to catch up to this concept because for now over 30 years you've been doing all your procedures under delegation or exemptions. So you need an order, but most of your orders, there are two types. There's direct orders and there's also medical directives or standing orders. So your medical directives are orders or policies that are in place in your department. So they'll be used for transvaginal examinations, bubble studies, those kinds of things. You'll need to make sure that you have medical directives in place giving you the authority to perform those studies. So you'll want to check your department policies and remove the delegations and ensure that you've got all the medical directives in place. So it's not going to be terrible if you still have delegations. It's kind of a belt and suspenders thing, but you'll want to be making sure that your policies reflect the fact that now you are regulated health professionals and you're accountable for your practice and for performing all those procedures. You'll want to look at our publication. CMRTO has a number of publications called What You Must Know About, which are practice guidelines and written in plain language that you can understand around professional accountability. So what is it that you are required to do now that you are a regulated health professional? And I do have to apologize, this one's not been updated yet. We are working our way through all our publications, but where you see MRT, that also applies to diagnostic medical sonographers now. And of course, all these publications are on our resources section of the website, including the webinars. So you can go back there and there is a webinar about professional accountability. So what does it mean to you now that you are a professional, a regulated professional? It means that you are going to follow the legal requirements to be able to practice your profession. There are standards that you now have to uphold, and there's core values and ethics that you have to follow. As the regulator, CMRTO is responsible for developing those standards and guidelines and to assist members in meeting your obligations. And that's the purpose of our website, our practice guidelines, and our What You Must Know About, is to provide you with all that information. So really, it's about knowing and following the rules. And when you first became a member, one of the things that you were required to do, even through grandparenting, is to complete the CMRTO jurisprudence or the legislation learning package. So this is a requirement for all applicants. You can always go back and review it. It's always up to date. So when there's changes going on, you can go back and review certain sections or the whole, all 7 modules. And of course, when you are a member, then you'll want to make sure that you record that learning again in your QAE portfolio. So what CMRTO members are always required to do under their professional accountability? Well, you have to adhere to the legislation, regulations, and other laws around scope of practice, authorized acts, orders for procedures, consent, professional conduct, confidentiality, and privacy. And you guys do this all the time, every single day without even thinking about it, because all those policies and processes and laws are set up in order to protect the patients, but also for you to follow. You have to adhere to the standards of practice, and that means being competent, accountable, and collaborative. The code of ethics, keep your registration in good standing and make sure that we have accurate and up-to-date information about you and your practice. So our new standards of practice came out on January 1st, 2018, and so they have now been updated to include all 5 specialties. And our standards of practice are the basis for registration, quality assurance, and complaints and discipline. They govern your practice, but also they govern the college's processes. And so you know what it is that the college is doing when we're looking at quality assurance. And in fact, under the professional misconduct regulation, failing to maintain the standards of practice of the profession is considered professional misconduct. So it's really the difference between competent practice and incompetent practice. So that's the test that we're going to use if we do get a complaint that a member is not competent, is we're going to look to see if their practice matches the standards of practice. In the standards of practice, we have the scope of practice statement, authorized acts, and so you can always go back there to review all those pieces. And everything is available in the ebook. So we don't publish hard copies of all our standards and all the things that you're required to follow, but we do have it in an ebook which is published on our website. So under the ebook, you can download it if you like, or you can go and look at the particular areas. So we've got practice requirements, the guidelines, and legislation and regulations. Another what you must know about that we've published recently to assist sonographers and MRTs in understanding the legislation around performing procedures is our what you must know about performing procedures. We also did a webinar this time last year about this. So you want to go back and look at this. This puts all the legislation and all the processes in place, and also includes a decision-making guide for performing procedures. So you can go through there, make sure you're within your legislative framework, that you have the knowledge, skill, and judgment, what to do if you don't have the knowledge, skill, and judgment. All those things are set out in there for you, and so you can follow those when you're making decisions about your practice and also developing policies in your department. One of the key things is, do I have the necessary education and experience to practice in this area? And it is a term, condition, and limitation on every single member's certificate of registration that's on the public register. And that's how we deal and address the 3 areas of practice of sonography. If you have the education and experience to do general, then you're not going to go and do cardiac until you do get the necessary education and experience. So that puts the limits on practice and makes sure that the public is protected, while at the same time allowing the individual practitioner to learn new procedures and keep up to date in their practice. Do I need to have professional liability insurance? Yes, all members are required to carry PLI, and you can get that from the OMRS, CMRTO, Sonography Canada, and other organizations. What you're required to do each year, you're required to renew your registration on time, complete your declaration of conduct, your quality assurance declaration, and complete the CMRTO QA program, including the profile, self-assessment, and at least 25 hours of continuing education and professional development activities. It's not just when you're going to be audited or your e-portfolio is going to be assessed. You have to do that every single year. And as you know, our QA program consists of our declaration, which is a statement that you confirm that you understand the requirements of the QA program and you're in compliance with it. And then you're required to do the self-assessment, QA profile, and the 25 hours of continuing education or professional professional development each year. We also have a peer and practice assessment and an individual practice assessment process. And Annette Hornby did a webinar last week about the QA program. And so you can always go back and have a look at that webinar. And I won't go into any more detail about that today. What you're required to do when the situation arises. So you're required to update any information about yourself if you have a change in name, business address within 7 days of the change. You're also required to comply with mandatory reporting obligations and keep current with changes in legislation, regulations, and other laws. So we know that you're doing that because you're listening to this webinar today. So that's all great stuff that you're doing. One question that our members often ask, why does my name appear on the public register? Well, the RHPA requires transparency, and so we are required to post the register of members, and not only when they're active members, but also if they've resigned or been suspended. Any member information which is not available to the public, such as your home address or your email address, that's kept strictly confidential. And we already talked briefly about the fact that employers will use the public register to confirm the registration status of their MRTs and DMSs. Here's the information which is available to the public on the public register. And you can go and update that information on the member and applicant portal. So if you've moved or if you have a new job, make sure you go into the portal and update that information. Really, the easiest way to keep up to date and know the rules and follow the rules is to read your CMRTO emails. So make sure that our emails are not going in your junk folder. We will not send you information that you don't need to know about. So do make sure that you read your emails when they come in. You can always contact us through the website, through email, and also we have a toll-free telephone number. So now we have a few questions and answers around sonography practice specifically. So we'll go through these and see if any concerns that you have are covered in this. So my first question for you is, do I have to be registered with CMRTO in order to perform vascular ultrasound? So we already talked about this at the very beginning of the presentation. So of course, yes, because you're applying sound waves to patients under the RHPA, that's the Controlled Acts regulation. And as of January 1 this year, only members of CMRTO, CPSO, the midwives, and nurses are authorized to apply sound waves to patients. So employers have an obligation to make sure that all their regulated health professionals hold a current registration with their regulatory college. And employers have an obligation not to use unregistered workers in place of a regulated health professional. So they can't be firing regulated health professionals and filling them in with unregulated health professionals to do the work that's covered under the RHPA. So employers are accustomed to all this because they've been doing it for MRTs now for over 25 years under the RHPA, the Public Hospitals Act, and the Independent Health Facilities Act. And so after January 1, employers could not permit sonographers who were not registered with CMRTO to practice or to work. If you need to demonstrate your registration confirmation, again, we are an electronic regulator, so we don't issue a certificate of registration or a wallet card. So if you want to demonstrate to your employer, you can go to the public register and find your name on the public register. And you can print it off if your employer wants hard copy evidence. The public register is updated within minutes after you've paid your registration fee. And so we can always be confident that the public register is up to date. Another question, do I have to inform CMRTO when I gain education or experience in another area of practice in my specialty? So if I decide to practice in vascular and I receive my education and experience in general, do I have to let CMRTO know? So no, you don't. Some of you might be surprised with that answer. You're a regulated professional with accountabilities to adhere to the legislation. So you're responsible to meet and maintain the standards of practice and practice only in those areas in which you have the education and experience and knowledge, skill, and judgment to practice safely. So because you already have a certificate of registration in the specialty of diagnostic medical sonography, you can always practice in another area within that specialty, provided you get the education and also the experience. And so if you want to practice in another area, you might want to talk to your manager about that. And here's practice standard number 8 under the CMRTO standards of practice. It says that you have to maintain and apply the necessary knowledge, skills, and judgment for all of the procedures that you do. And you, if you're not competent in a particular area, refrain from acting in that area until you do make sure that you have developed the necessary knowledge, skills, and judgment. And of course, all members are required to do the QA program as part of maintaining and improving their competence. And don't forget to record that learning. So if you do learn another area of practice, you can certainly include it in your quality assurance program, but you don't need to notify us if you get certified with Sonography Canada, for example, in another area. Another question that sonographers often ask is, isn't my Sonography Canada or ARDMS credential the same as registration with CMRTO? So what do you guys think? Yes, no, not sure? No, certification and regulation are not the same thing. So your credential with Sonography Canada, ARDMS, or any other group is not enough to practice in Ontario as of January 1st this year. So registration with a regulatory body demonstrates that you're currently authorized to practice the profession and that you will do so in accordance with the regulator's standards of practice. Certification is a demonstration of knowledge or competence awarded by the certification body at a point in time. So when you've completed your educational program and you write your certification exams, that's when you get your certification. Whereas regulation is an ongoing obligation, and you are required to do continuing education every year in the legislation, and we also have the complaints and discipline process. And so that really is a way of demonstrating that you are currently competent and able to practice the profession in Ontario. Now, another question is, what about designations? So I've put at the bottom of this slide Annette's designations. She is a sonographer as well as being an MRT. And so she can use both her designations, both her CMRTO protected title or DMS, and also her Sonography Canada certification. So the certification examination, CMRTO has approved the Sonography Canada exam as its approved examination in the specialty of diagnostic medical sonography. And so that's under our registration regulation. And you'll remember, some of you, that for 2018 only, during the grandparenting period, we did approve the ARDMS examination in order to get your certificate of registration with CMRTO. But as of January 1st this year, that has now ended, and we're only approving Sonography Canada. Now, employers may request their sonographers to complete specific training. So I know ARDMS has pediatrics and MSK. So that's okay. Your employer can still require additional certification, but it's not a requirement for your certificate of registration with CMRTO. So that would be another way that you can demonstrate that you have the education and experience to be practicing in the area of sonography in which you are practicing. Okay, great. And this really is the difference between the regulator and the association or the certification bodies. So our job is public protection. We have mandatory registration or membership. We set the scope of practice, code of ethics, standards of practice, and all the entry to practice requirements in law. You don't get any choice in this. It's all set out in the law. Whereas association and certification bodies, they have member services, voluntary membership, and they serve and support their members through education, advocacy, conferences, job postings, PLI, and other member benefits. So it's complicated, especially in the area of sonography, because in addition to CMRTO now, which is the mandatory part, you also have the Ontario Association of Medical Radiation Sciences, in addition to Sonography Canada and the ARDMS. But the thing to remember is that CMRTO is the mandatory part. That's the one part that you have to do every year and demonstrate to your employer. Now, your employer might want you to belong to other certification pieces around the areas of practice we talked about, like pediatrics or MSK. And also, you'll be wanting to think about where you're going to get your own PLI. So one of the questions sonographers often ask is, do I have to belong to all these organizations? And so things that you'll want to consider is, does my employer require membership with an association or certification in a particular area of practice? Where will I get my PLI? And then what other value do I get from my association? So the regulator is here for the public, but the association is there for the members. And so that's where you get your education, conferences, and other member benefits. And a key question for sonographers is, will I want to practice outside Ontario sometime in the future? Because sonographers are only regulated in Ontario right now. And so if you want to practice in another province, often they're looking for membership in Sonography Canada or ARDMS, because the other provinces, in the absence of regulation, the employers are often asking for that. So just things to keep in mind about your career as you move forward. Do DMS students have the legal authority to practice after they've completed their program and before they become registered? What do you think? So this is another area of change. So no, students cannot practice until they are registered with CMRTO. So in the past, sonography students were able to get jobs after they completed the program, but before they wrote the exams. And now only registered members of CMRTO are able to apply sound waves. But we work with the applicants, with the students, to make sure that we can get them registered as soon as they get their examination results. And this is because the RHPA has an exemption that permits students in an approved program to apply sound waves or electromagnetism for MRI, while supervised by a member of the profession. So that's that exemption piece we're talking about. So as long as they're supervised, they're allowed to apply sound waves. But of course, when they're no longer in the program, then they're no longer students. And so we've got this bit of a gap between when they complete their program and when they get their examination results. And at that time, they're not legally authorized to practice. Can a member of CMRTO in the specialty of diagnostic medical sonography perform fetal ultrasounds for non-medical reasons? What do you think about this one? Yes, no, don't know. Again, it's a no. So CMRTO members can only perform their authorized acts, which include applying sound waves, when engaged in the practice of the profession and when there is an order for the procedures. And so under the RHPA, under the Controlled Acts regulation, our members need to have an order from a physician or a midwife or a nurse practitioner to be able to apply sound waves. And so it would be professional misconduct for a CMRTO member to use ultrasound only to obtain a picture or video of a fetus or determine the gender for non-medical purposes. And this is again back to the issue that we don't regulate the use of sonography or ultrasound by other professions. We regulate sonographers, not the use of technology. And the government determines which health professionals are able to apply sound waves and how the technology is going to be used. So that's the end of the presentation today. I hope you found that helpful. We had a few little hints in there as you're fine-tuning all your policies and processes related to the practice of sonography now that you're regulated. So the easiest way to keep up to date is to review our website. We're on social media, so follow us there. Read your email and tell your colleagues. So thank you very much for your attention today, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks when we'll be talking about the CMRTO Act. Thank you all, and have a great day. Bye now.